Blood dripped from his pale fingers onto the marble floor of the throne room, each crimson drop echoing like thunder in the silence. And the girl, a mere servant who should have cowered in terror, sprinted toward the most feared creature in all the kingdoms, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face, her voice breaking with a desperation that made every vampire in the chamber freeze. "You're hurt!" Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. King Draven Nightborn, sovereign of the Shadow Court and oldest of the immortal bloodlines, stared at the human girl as if she had materialized from madness itself. His court of nobles stood paralyzed along the walls, their ancient eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. No one, absolutely no one, had ever addressed the king with such familiar concern, let alone a human servant girl who ranked lower than the rats in the dungeon. The wound across Draven's chest was savage, a diagonal slash that would have killed any lesser vampire instantly. Silver residue glinted along the edges, poison to his kind. He had returned from hunting rogue vampire insurgents who sought to overthrow his 1,000-year reign, and he had expected to brood alone while his supernatural healing closed the wound. He had not expected this. The girl reached him before any guard could react. Her small, calloused hands hovered near his chest, trembling but determined. Her eyes, an unusual shade of amber in the torchlight, searched his face with genuine anguish. "The silver," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's preventing the healing. You need—" "Seize her!" commanded Lord Victor, Draven's eldest advisor, his voice sharp with alarm. Two guards moved forward, but Draven raised one hand, stopping them cold.
"Wait." His voice was a low rumble, dangerous and curious all at once. He studied the girl properly now. She was perhaps 19 or 20, dressed in the plain gray tunic of the castle's lowest servants, her dark hair escaping a hasty braid. Dirt streaked her face, and her knees were scraped raw. She must have been scrubbing floors in the lower halls when news of his return spread through the castle. "What is your name?" he asked. She blinked, surprised by the question, then seemed to remember herself and dropped into a clumsy curtsy. Elena, Your Majesty. Please, the silver needs to be extracted or it will spread to your heart. I've seen it happen to—" She stopped abruptly, her face paling further. "Seen it happen to whom?" Draven leaned forward slightly, despite the pain lancing through his chest. The wound was indeed spreading, black veins creeping outward from the slash. Silver poisoning, rare and deadly, even to him. Elena's throat worked as she swallowed. "My mother. She was a healer in our village before the hunters came. They used silver weapons. I watched her try to save a vampire who had defended our village from bandits. The silver spread like yours is doing now. She couldn't save him because no one would help her extract it in time." The throne room remained silent. Vampires did not commonly receive healing from humans. They certainly did not receive compassion from them. Not in this age where the war between hunters and vampires had made trust a forgotten currency. Draven made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. "Then extract it, Elena." Gasps rippled through the court. Lord Victor stepped forward, his aristocratic face tight with disapproval. "My king, this is highly irregular. We have physicians—" "Who are currently treating the wounded in the East Wing," Draven interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "And by the time they arrive, the poison will have reached my heart. The girl has knowledge. Let her prove it."
Elena's hands were shaking harder now, but she nodded. "I need clean water, strong spirits, a silver knife, the irony, I know, and clean cloth, and poppy milk for the pain." A guard laughed, a harsh sound. "The king does not require—" "Bring her what she needs," Draven commanded, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "Now." The court scattered into action, though their movements carried reluctance. Within minutes, a table was brought beside the throne, and the supplies Elena requested were laid out. She washed her hands meticulously, then turned to Draven with an expression that was somehow both terrified and resolute. "This will hurt, Your Majesty," she said quietly. "Even for you. Pain and I are old companions." He removed his ruined tunic, revealing the full extent of the wound. The black veins had spread further, now reaching toward his collarbone and down toward his abdomen. Murmurs of concern whispered through the assembled nobles. Elena picked up the silver knife with steady hands, steadier than anyone expected. She met Draven's eyes one last time, seeking permission. He nodded. She worked with surprising confidence, her mother's training evident in every careful movement. The knife cut away the poisoned flesh in thin layers, extracting the silver fragments embedded deep in the wound. Draven remained motionless, though sweat beaded his brow, a rare sign of his body fighting both the poison and the agony of silver cutting into him again. "Talk to me," he said, through gritted teeth, needing distraction from the burning. "Tell me how a healer's daughter ended up scrubbing my floors." Elena's hands never faltered as she spoke. "After my mother died trying to save that vampire, the village elders blamed her for showing kindness to your kind. They said she betrayed humanity. We were cast out. My father tried to find work in other villages, but the story followed us. When he fell ill last winter, I sold myself into service here to pay for his medicine."
She paused, extracting a particularly deep fragment. "He died anyway. I had nowhere else to go. You could have run, hidden yourself away from this life. And starve?" A bitter smile crossed her lips. "At least here I have food and a roof, even if I'm treated as less than human by those who aren't human at all." Draven found himself intrigued by her honesty. Humans in his castle usually groveled or cowered. They certainly never spoke to him with such frank bitterness. "You blame vampires for your circumstances?" "I blame cruelty," she corrected, pulling out another silver fragment and dropping it into a bowl with a sharp clink, "which seems to be distributed equally among all species. The hunters who killed my mother's patient were human. The villagers who condemned her were human. But so was she, and she showed more mercy in her short life than most will show in 100 years. Her amber eyes flicked up to meet his. "The wound is nearly clean, just a few more pieces." 20 agonizing minutes later, Elena stepped back, her hands bloodied, but her expression satisfied. "Done. The silver is out. Your body should begin healing naturally now." Already, Draven could feel the dark veins receding, his ancient blood working to repair the damage. He examined Elena with new appreciation. "You have your mother's skill." "I have her hands and her knowledge," Elena replied, wiping her palms on a cloth. "Whether I have her courage is still debatable." She finally seemed to realize the magnitude of what she had done. Touched the Vampire King, cut into his flesh, spoken to him as if he were merely another patient. Color drained from her face. I should return to my duties." "No." The single word stopped her retreat. Draven rose from his throne, the wound now closing to a thin red line. "You will remain here. From this moment forward, you are elevated from your servant position. You will serve as my personal healer." The court erupted in protest. Lord Victor's voice rose above the others. "My king, this is unprecedented! A human in such a position of trust!" "Is exactly what this court needs," Draven said coldly, his eyes sweeping across the assembled nobles. "Look at yourselves. Not one of you moved to help your king. You stood frozen, bound by protocol and prejudice, willing to let me fall because asking a human for help offended your sensibilities." He turned back to Elena. "This girl showed more loyalty in 5 minutes than some of you have shown in centuries." Elena looked like she might faint. "Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified to." "You just saved my life." His tone softened marginally. "You will be trained in our ways, taught to understand vampire physiology. In return, you will have chambers in the royal wing, proper clothing, and a salary befitting your position." "But the others will hate me," she whispered. "Both the humans and the vampires." "Then you will be in the unique position of understanding both," Draven replied, "which is precisely why you are perfect for this role." He could see her mind working, weighing her options. She had none, really, and they both knew it. But he appreciated that she took the time to consider anyway, maintaining her dignity even in a situation where she held no power. Finally, Elena curtsied properly. "I accept, Your Majesty. Thank you for this opportunity." "Don't thank me yet," he said, with the ghost of a smile. "You haven't met the court physician you'll be working under. He's 500 years old and temperamental as a spring storm." That night, as Elena was escorted to her new chambers, rooms larger than her entire family's cottage had been, she caught sight of herself in a mirror. The frightened girl who had scrubbed floors that morning was gone. In her place stood someone who had touched a king and lived, someone who had been given a chance to rise above her circumstances. But as she lay in the unfamiliar luxury of a featherbed, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped onto a path from which there would be no return. The Vampire King's blood still stained her hands, invisible now, but permanently marking her as something she hadn't been before. Neither fully human nor accepted by vampires, she had become something in between. And in the throne room, Draven touched the nearly healed wound on his chest and wondered why the memory of amber eyes and calloused hands felt more significant than it should. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Elena had been thrust into a world of shadows and blood, where time moved differently and danger wore beautiful faces. The court physician, Master Aldrich, proved every bit as difficult as Draven had warned. The ancient vampire had treated her with barely concealed disdain during their first meeting, his pale lips curled in disgust at having to work alongside a human. "Your kind are fragile, short-lived, and woefully ignorant," he had announced on her first day in the royal infirmary. "You will touch nothing, speak to no one, and if you faint at the sight of blood, which seems inevitable, do so quietly and away from my patients." But Elena had her mother's stubborn spine. She absorbed every lesson, memorized every property of vampire physiology that Aldrich grudgingly taught, and proved she could work through exhaustion that would have broken someone less determined. By the end of the 2nd week, Aldrich had stopped actively insulting her. By the end of the 3rd, he had even offered a curt nod of approval when she correctly diagnosed a young vampire's blood poisoning from contaminated feeding. Still, her new position came with a loneliness that cut deeper than any wound she treated. The human servants regarded her with jealous suspicion, whispering that she must have seduced the king to gain such favor. The vampire nobles treated her as an amusing curiosity at best, a dangerous anomaly at worst.
She existed in a space between worlds, belonging to neither. Her only regular contact with Draven came during mandatory evening reports, where she updated him on the health status of his court. These meetings were brief, professional, and conducted in his private study rather than the throne room. Elena found herself both dreading and anticipating them. Tonight's report covered 17 patients, including 3 wounded warriors who had returned from border skirmishes with vampire hunters. Elena stood before Draven's desk, her posture straight and her voice steady as she detailed treatments and prognoses. "And the silver poisoning cases?" Draven asked, not looking up from the document he was reviewing. Responding well, Master Aldrich developed a new extraction technique based on— She hesitated. "Based on what you did for me," Draven finished, finally meeting her eyes. "He won't admit it, but I have my sources. You've had quite an impact on our ancient physician." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I simply shared my mother's methods. Master Aldrich improved upon them." Gracious as always, Draven set down the document. "Tell me, Elena, are you settling into your new position? I've heard rumors." "Rumors are the castle's favorite pastime, Your Majesty. I pay them no mind. Even when they suggest you achieved your position through unsavory means." Elena's jaw tightened. "People will believe what comforts them. If they need to reduce my mother's knowledge and my work to something scandalous, that speaks to their limitations, not mine." A smile ghosted across Draven's lips. "You have claws hidden beneath that respectful exterior." "I have survival instincts, Your Majesty. There's a difference." "Is there?" He rose from his chair, moving with that preternatural grace all vampires possessed. "I think you have more than survival instincts. I think you have your mother's fire and perhaps more courage than you credit yourself with." He was closer now, close enough that Elena could see the silver flecks in his dark eyes, the perfect paleness of his skin. Being near him always made her hyper-aware of her own heartbeat, her own warmth. Vampires ran cold, she had learned. They were beautiful corpses animated by ancient magic and blood. "You're staring," Draven observed, amusement coloring his tone. Elena blinked, mortified. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I was just noting the difference in body temperature regulation between our species for the medical records." "Of course, for medical purposes." His smile widened slightly. "And what else do your medical observations tell you about me?" This felt dangerous, like a test she hadn't studied for. "That you haven't fed properly in several days. The faint darkness under your eyes, the slight tension in your movements, you're weakening yourself." The amusement vanished from his expression. "You're observant." "It's my job to be." Elena held her ground, even as every instinct screamed at her to step back. "Your Majesty, if you're abstaining from feeding for political reasons—" "My feeding habits are not your concern," he said sharply, then seemed to catch himself. He turned away, returning to his desk. "You're dismissed for the evening." Elena recognized a dismissal when she heard one. She curtsied and left quickly, but the encounter left her unsettled. She had seen something in that moment, a flash of vulnerability, quickly concealed. The Vampire King was hiding something. Later that night, unable to sleep, Elena found herself in the castle's extensive library. If Draven wouldn't explain his behavior, perhaps the books would. She searched through texts on vampire politics, history, and custom, looking for anything that might explain why a vampire king would deliberately starve himself. Interesting reading material for a healer. Elena spun, nearly dropping the book she held. Lord Victor stood in the doorway, his aristocratic features sharp in the lamplight. The king's advisor had been coldly polite to her since her elevation, but she didn't trust him. Something about his eyes reminded her of the village elders who had condemned her mother, that same blend of certainty and cruelty. I'm trying to better understand the patients I serve, Elena said carefully, setting the book down. By reading about the blood accords, Victor moved into the library with predatory grace. Those are political treaties, not medical texts. Elena's mind raced. The book she had pulled was indeed about the blood accords, ancient agreements between vampire kingdoms regulating feeding practices and human relations. She scrambled for a plausible excuse. Master Aldrich mentioned them in passing. I wanted to understand the context. Did he? Victor's tone suggested he didn't believe her. How diligent of you. Tell me, Elena, do you know why a vampire of His Majesty's age and power would resist feeding? The question was too pointed to be casual. I don't, my lord. Liar. The word was soft but cutting. I've watched you. You notice everything, file it away behind those expressive eyes. You've already deduced something. Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was dangerous ground. If I have any concerns about His Majesty's health, I would bring them to him directly, my lord. Admirably loyal. Foolishly so. Victor picked up the book she had been reading, flipping through it with deliberate slowness. The blood accords specify that vampire rulers must demonstrate control over their feeding instincts. To feed too frequently, too greedily, suggests weakness. But to abstain entirely, he glanced at her, that suggests something else entirely. It suggests fear. The king fears nothing, Elena said automatically. Everyone fears something, little healer. Victor set down the book. His Majesty fears losing control. He hasn't fed properly since you arrived because you're exactly his type. Young, innocent, with that particular quality of blood that calls to our kind like a siren's song. He abstains because he doesn't trust himself around you. Elena's breath caught. That's absurd. Is it? Why else would he keep you close? Why elevate a servant girl to such prominence? Victor circled her slowly. He's testing himself, proving he can resist temptation. It's both noble and incredibly foolish. A weakened king invites challenges to his rule. Then he should feed from someone else, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. He should, but he won't. Victor stopped in front of her. Because the king, for all his centuries of existence, has developed something terribly inconvenient. He's developed scruples, principles. He refuses to feed from the unwilling, and most humans in this castle are terrified of him. Except you. Elena's mind reeled. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting nothing. I'm stating facts. Victor moved toward the door, then paused. But if you truly care about the king's well-being, you might consider offering him what he needs, before his weakness becomes known to those who would exploit it. He left her alone in the library, surrounded by books and impossible choices. Elena didn't sleep that night. She paced her chambers until dawn, Victor's words echoing in her mind. The implications were staggering. If Draven was truly weakening himself because of her, she was inadvertently putting him and his entire kingdom at risk. The vampire insurgents he had been fighting weren't Dawn. They were merely regrouping. A weakened king was an invitation for rebellion. But the thought of offering herself as food twisted her stomach. She had seen vampire feedings before, brief glimpses in the castle's darker corners. The gasps, the loss of control, the intimacy of it. Feeding was deeply personal for vampires, almost sacred. It wasn't simply sustenance, it was connection, trust, vulnerability. And despite Victor's words, she couldn't be certain of his motivations. The advisor had never liked her presence. Was this genuine concern for the king, or manipulation designed to compromise her position?
If she offered herself to Draven and he recoiled in disgust, her carefully built credibility would shatter. But if Victor was right and Draven was suffering because of some misguided protectiveness toward her, you look as though you've battled demons all night. Elena jumped, spinning to find Master Aldrich in her doorway. The ancient physician regarded her with those unsettling pale eyes that missed nothing. "Forgive me, Master. I didn't hear you knock." "I didn't." He entered without invitation, his movements precise despite his age. "You've been distracted during our work today. 3 times you nearly administered the wrong dosage. What troubles you?" Elena hesitated. Aldrich was Draven's subject, but he was also bound by a healer's oath to put patient welfare above all else. If you noticed a patient deliberately harming themselves, what would you do? "Intervene," Aldrich said immediately. "A healer's duty is to preserve life, even when the patient resists." Even if that patient was the king? Aldrich's expression shifted minutely, a brief flash of understanding. "So you've noticed. Good. I was beginning to think you were less observant than I credited. You knew he was starving himself? I've known Draven Nightborn for 300 years, girl. I know when he's being an idiot." Aldrich moved to her window, looking out over the castle grounds. "The king has always struggled with the predatory nature of our existence. He sees himself as a guardian of this realm, protector of both vampires and the humans under his rule. To feed from an unwilling human violates his moral code. But surely there are willing donors. Willing out of fear or obligation, yes. Willing out of genuine trust, that's vanishingly rare." Aldrich turned back to her. "You're the first human in centuries who has looked at him without terror or greed in your eyes. You see him as a patient, a person, even a leader, but not as a monster. That quality of perception, combined with your particular blood chemistry, makes you irresistible to him and terrifying. Because he fears hurting me? Because he fears what it would mean if he didn't want to stop." Aldrich's brutal honesty cut through Elena's confusion. "Vampire feeding creates bonds, Elena. The more often a vampire feeds from the same source, the stronger that bond becomes. For young vampires, it's merely convenience. For ancient ones like the king, it can become something far more significant. He avoids you because intimacy is dangerous for someone in his position." Elena sank into a chair, processing this information. "Lord Victor suggested I should offer." "Victor is a political animal who sees people as chess pieces," Aldrich interrupted. "He's not wrong that the king needs to feed, but his motivations are suspect. He likely wants to compromise either you or the king for his own purposes." The physician's expression softened marginally. However, his reasoning, if not his motives, is sound. The king's weakness will be noticed soon, if it hasn't been already. And a challenge to his rule now, while vampire hunters grow bolder on our borders, could be catastrophic. "So, what should I do?" "That depends on what you're willing to sacrifice." Aldrich moved toward the door. "Think carefully, girl. Once certain paths are taken, there's no returning to what was before." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elena went through her duties mechanically, her mind churning. She treated wounds, mixed medicines, and avoided Draven entirely, claiming other duties when the time for her evening report arrived. But that night, she made her decision. She found Draven in his private study well past midnight when the castle had settled into its nocturnal rhythms. He sat by the fireplace, a glass of wine, regular wine, not blood-infused, dangling from his fingers. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "Elena." Surprise colored his voice. "You missed your evening report." "I know. I'm sorry." She closed the door behind her, her heart hammering. "I needed time to think. About why you haven't been feeding properly since I arrived." The glass in Draven's hand stilled. "That's not your concern. It is when your weakness threatens this kingdom." Elena moved closer,
forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "I've been researching vampire physiology. A vampire of your age and power requires regular feeding to maintain strength. You haven't had a proper feeding in nearly a month. Your healing is slower. Your reflexes are diminished. If the insurgents attack now, they won't dare." But his voice lacked conviction. "They will if they learn their king is vulnerable." Elena took a breath, steadying herself. "Victor told me you're abstaining because of me, because you don't trust yourself around my blood." Draven's eyes flashed dangerously. Victor had no right. Is it true? The question hung between them. Draven set down his glass with exaggerated care, rising to his feet with that predatory grace that reminded Elena exactly what he was. What if it is? What possible difference could it make? It makes every difference. Elena's voice was stronger now, fed by determination. "If I'm the problem, then I'm also the solution. Feed from me." The words fell like stones into still water. Draven stared at her as if she had suggested burning down the castle. Absolutely not. Why? Because... He turned away, his hands clenching into fists. "Because you don't understand what you're offering. Vampire feeding isn't like your human medical procedures. It's intimate, binding. Once I start, I might not be able to stop." "You stopped when I was treating your wound," Elena pointed out. "You had complete control then. That was different."
I was injured, focused on survival. This... He shook his head. "Your blood calls to me, Elena. It has since the moment you ran to me in the throne room. Do you know what kind of discipline it requires to be near you, to smell the warmth of your blood and resist? I am not some noble hero from your human stories. I am a predator who has learned to control his nature through centuries of practice. But that control has limits." Elena moved around to face him again, refusing to let him hide. "Then set boundaries. Take only what you need to regain your strength. I trust you." "You shouldn't." His voice was raw. "You should be terrified of me." "But I'm not." Elena reached out, placing her hand on his arm. He felt cold through the fabric of his shirt, and she could sense the tension vibrating through him. "I trust you, Draven. Not because I'm naive, but because I've seen who you are. You value life, even human life. You've built a kingdom based on protecting the vulnerable rather than exploiting them. That's not the behavior of a mindless predator." Draven looked down at her hand on his arm, something complex and painful moving across his face. "You don't know what you're asking. Then show me." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "Show me what I'm asking, and let me make an informed choice." For a long moment, Draven was silent. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and brushed his fingers along her neck, just above her pulse. Elena shivered at the coolness of his touch, at the intensity of his gaze. "When a vampire feeds," he said quietly, "they can feel everything. The donor's emotions, their fears, their desires. It's why forced feedings are so violating. The vampire experiences their victim's terror. But when the donor is willing, truly willing," his fingers traced the line of her pulse, "it becomes something else entirely. Connection, understanding. It's addictive, Elena, especially between compatible individuals. Are we compatible?" Elena's voice came out breathier than she intended. "Dangerously so." His hand dropped. "Which is why this is a terrible idea. But you'll do it anyway," Elena said, reading the resignation in his eyes. "Because you know I'm right. The kingdom needs you at full strength." Draven laughed, a hollow sound. "You're manipulating me with logic. How delightfully human. I learned from the best." Elena managed a small smile.
You manipulate your entire court with logic daily. True. He studied her for another long moment, then seemed to reach a decision. Very well, but we do this properly, with precautions. And if at any point you feel uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Understood? Elena nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Understood. Draven gestured to the chair by the fireplace. Sit. Be comfortable. Tension will make it worse. Elena sat, her hands gripping the armrests. Draven knelt beside the chair, putting himself at eye level with her. Listen to me carefully, he said. I'm going to enter a feeding state. My eyes will change, my canines will extend. I'll look monstrous. Don't panic. I've seen vampires in feeding state before. Not me, and not this close. His expression was serious. Remember that I'm still in control. The appearance changes, but I remain myself. Can you trust that? Elena met his eyes. I trust you. Draven nodded slowly. Then he placed one cool hand on the side of her neck, his thumb resting against her pulse. Elena felt her heartbeat quicken under his touch. With his other hand, he gently tilted her head to the side, exposing the vulnerable line of her throat. Deep breath, he instructed, and don't fight the sensation. The more you resist, the more it will hurt. Elena breathed in, forcing her muscles to relax. She felt Draven lean closer, felt the coolness of his breath against her skin. Then came the change she had warned her about. His grip tightened slightly, and when she glanced at him, his eyes had darkened to pure black. His canines elongated into deadly points. He looked every inch the predator he claimed to be. And then he bit. The initial pierce was sharp, a sting that made Elena gasp. But almost immediately, a strange warmth flooded through her, radiating from the bite outward. It didn't hurt so much as it overwhelmed, a sensation that was part pain, part pleasure, part something else entirely that Elena had no words for. She could feel Draven drinking, feel the gentle pull as he took her blood. But more than that, she could sense him. His desperate hunger finally being sated, his relief at feeding properly after so long, and underneath it all, a deep well of loneliness that echoed her own. He was isolated, she realized. Millennia of existence had taught him to keep everyone at a distance. Even surrounded by his court, he was fundamentally alone. Just as she was, caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. In that moment of connection, Elena understood why vampire feeding could be so dangerous. This wasn't just physical. It was emotional intimacy at its most raw and vulnerable. Draven pulled back sooner than Elena expected, his eyes already fading back to their normal dark silver. He remained kneeling beside her chair, breathing hard despite not needing to breathe at all. His hand trembled slightly as he touched the bite mark, using his own blood to seal the wound, an old vampire trick that prevented scarring and infection. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough. Elena nodded, feeling lightheaded but not unpleasantly so. "I'm fine. Are you?" A startled laugh escaped him. "You just let me feed from you, and you're asking if I'm all right?" "You looked like you were in pain," Elena said honestly. "Not physical pain, something else." Draven's expression shuddered. "You felt that?" "I felt a lot of things." Elena reached out and touched his face gently. "You're lonely." He pulled back as if burned. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The connection, the understanding. It complicates everything."
"Would you prefer if I remained blissfully ignorant?" Elena challenged. "If we pretended this was purely transactional?"
"Yes," Draven said bluntly, standing abruptly. "That would be infinitely easier." "Easier isn't always better." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena saw the conflict written across his ageless face. "You should go," he said finally. "Rest. You'll be weak tomorrow." Elena stood, steadying herself against the chair. "This doesn't have to be complicated, Draven. We can set boundaries, professional distance." "Can we?" He moved away, putting space between them. "You felt what I felt, Elena. You know that's no longer possible. Every time we're in the same room now, that connection will be there. Feeding bonds don't fade. They only grow stronger with repeated exposure." "Then we won't repeat it," Elena said, though the words felt wrong even as she spoke them. "You fed. Your strength will return. We can go back to how things were." The look Draven gave her was almost pitying. "You really believe that?" Elena didn't answer, because she didn't believe it, and they both knew it. Something had shifted between them in those few minutes of intimacy. The professional distance she had carefully maintained had evaporated, replaced by an understanding that felt both precious and dangerous. "Go," Draven said again, gentler this time. "We'll talk about this another time, when we've both had time to think." Elena left, her mind spinning. As she walked through the dark corridors toward her chambers, she touched the place on her neck where Draven had bitten her. The wound was perfectly healed, but she could still feel the phantom sensation of his mouth against her skin, the rush of connection that had flowed between them. She had wanted to help him, to solve the problem of his starvation in a practical, logical way. She hadn't anticipated that saving his life would endanger her heart. 3 days passed, and Elena threw herself into her work with desperate focus. If she stayed busy enough, she could almost ignore the new awareness that hummed through her whenever Draven was near. Almost. Master Aldrich noticed, of course. The ancient physician missed nothing. "You fed him," he said bluntly during their morning rounds. Elena didn't bother denying it. His strength was failing. It seemed the logical solution. "Logic," Aldrich snorted. "There's nothing logical about vampire feeding bonds, girl. How strong is the connection?" Elena pretended to focus on grinding herbs. "I can sense when he's near, and during the feeding, I could feel his emotions." "As he likely felt yours." Aldrich's expression was grave. "This is dangerous ground, Elena. The king has ruled for over 1,000 years by maintaining clear boundaries between himself and those he governs. Personal attachments make rulers vulnerable, exploitable." "I'm aware." "Are you? Or are you playing at understanding while your heart writes a different story?" Aldrich's tone was sharp. "I've seen this pattern before. Human and vampire, drawn together by circumstances, convinced they can maintain professional distance while a feeding bond grows between them. It never ends well." "Then what would you have me do?" Elena's composure cracked slightly. "Let him starve? Watch the kingdom fall to insurgents because their king was too noble to feed properly? I would have you be realistic about the consequences of your choice." Aldrich softened marginally. "The feeding bond will grow stronger with time, even without repeated feedings. You'll find yourself thinking about him constantly, worrying about him, craving his presence. And he'll experience the same pull toward you. It's chemistry, Elena, biology. The vampire body recognizes compatible blood and bonds accordingly." Elena set down the mortar she'd been working with. "How do we break it?" "You can't. Not completely. Time and distance can weaken it. But given that you work in his castle," Aldrich shook his head, "you'd have to leave, completely, never see him again." The thought sent an unexpected jolt of pain through Elena. "I can't leave. I have nowhere to go. And my work here is excellent, yes. You've proven yourself a skilled healer." Aldrich's expression was almost kind. "Which is why I'm telling you this now, before the bond deepens further. You still have a choice, Elena, but that window is closing. Once you feed him again, once the bond solidifies, Choosing to leave will feel impossible. Elena absorbed this in silence. Then a thought occurred to her. You speak from experience. Aldrich's face went carefully blank. That's not relevant. It is, though. Elena studied him with new eyes. You understand feeding bonds because you had one. What happened? She died. The words were flat, emotionless. Humans do that. They age and fade and die. Aldrich turned away. I was younger then, stupid enough to believe love could bridge the gap between mortal and immortal. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was 3 centuries ago, but the pain in his voice suggested otherwise. Learn from my mistake, girl. Guard your heart. The king may be noble, may be kind, but in the end, he's immortal and you're not. That's an insurmountable difference. Before Elena could respond, shouting echoed from the corridor outside. Both healers rushed to the door to find a guard supporting a wounded vampire, blood streaming from multiple silver-tipped arrows in his chest. Ambush, the wounded vampire gasped. Hunter attack on the western border. They have new weapons, more effective silver compounds. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Elena and Aldrich moved in perfect synchronization, dragging the vampire to a treatment table. Elena's hands flew through the familiar motions, cutting away clothing, examining wounds, preparing instruments for silver extraction. How many wounded? Aldrich demanded of the guard. 15 so far, more incoming. The hunters got inside our perimeter defenses. His Majesty is leading the counterattack.
Elena's heart lurched. Draven was out there, fighting hunters who had developed more lethal silver weapons, and while he had fed 3 days ago, he was still not at full strength. Not yet. She forced the worry down, focusing on the patient before her. This silver compound is different, she said, examining the arrows. Look at how the tissue is necrotizing. Whatever they've coated these with, it's accelerating the poisoning. Aldrich swore in a language Elena didn't recognize. Then we need to work faster. Guard, clear the main infirmary. We're about to be very busy. The next hours blurred into organized chaos. Wounded vampires flooded the infirmary, each bearing wounds from the new silver weapons. Elena worked alongside Aldrich, their earlier conversation forgotten in the urgency of saving lives. She extracted arrow after arrow, cleaned and sealed wounds, administered blood supplements to those too weak to hunt. Some didn't make it. Elena watched 3 vampires succumb to the silver poisoning before they could be treated, their bodies turning gray and lifeless as the poison reached their hearts. Each death carved something away from her, a reminder that for all her skill, she couldn't save everyone. She was treating her 19th patient when Draven finally returned. He strode into the infirmary covered in blood, some his own, most belonging to others. His eyes swept the room, taking in the wounded, the dead, the healers working frantically. His gaze found Elena, and she felt that pull, that awareness of him that had nothing to do with sight. He was hurt. She could sense it through their bond, even before she saw the silver-tipped bolt protruding from his left shoulder. "Your Majesty," Aldrich said, noticing him. "You're wounded." "It can wait. See to the others first." Draven moved through the infirmary, stopping to speak with each wounded vampire, his presence steadying the frightened and reassuring the dying. Elena watched him, understanding something new about the Vampire King. He wasn't just a ruler. He was a father to his people, a guardian who took their pain as his own. The weight of every death, every wound, pressed on him visibly. Finally, when the last of the wounded had been stabilized, Draven allowed himself to be examined. He sat on a treatment table while Aldrich checked the other patients, leaving Elena to attend to him. "You should have come in immediately," Elena said quietly, examining the wound. "This silver is different, more toxic." "I know. I've seen what it does." Draven's voice was tired. "How many did we lose?" 7 here. I don't know about casualties in the field." His jaw tightened. 12 in the field. 19 total. And we only killed 6 hunters before they retreated.
His hand clenched into a fist. They're getting bolder, better armed. Someone is funding them, providing them with weapons technology that shouldn't exist. Elena prepared her instruments, her hands steady despite the emotions churning inside her. This is going to hurt. Everything hurts today. But he met her eyes. I'm glad you're here. The simple statement sent warmth through Elena's chest. She began working on the wound, extracting the bolt carefully. Draven remained motionless, though she could sense his pain through their bond. Not just the physical pain of the wound, but the deeper anguish of losing subjects he'd sworn to protect. It's not your fault, Elena said softly, focusing on her work. The hunters chose violence. You didn't. I should have seen it coming. Should have reinforced the western border. You can't predict everything. You're a king, not an oracle. Draven laughed bitterly. Tell that to the families of the dead. Elena paused in her work, looking up at him. You honor them by grieving, but drowning in guilt doesn't bring them back. What brings them justice is stopping whoever armed the hunters with these new weapons. Wise words for someone so young.
My mother used to say that grief is love with nowhere to go. Elena resumed extracting the silver. The fact that you grieve proves you loved them. That matters. Draven was quiet for a long moment. Then, your mother sounds like she was remarkable. She was. Elena's throat tightened. She believed in healing everyone, regardless of their nature. It killed her, but she never regretted her choices. Do you? The question hung between them. Elena finished extracting the silver, cleaning the wound with careful precision. I used to, she admitted. I blamed her for choosing her principles over survival, for leaving my father and me alone. But working here, seeing what you do for your people, I understand her better now. Some things are worth dying for. Nothing is worth you dying for, Draven said sharply. Do you understand me, Elena? Whatever happens in this conflict with the hunters, whatever develops between us, your safety comes first. Always. Elena felt that pull again, stronger now. The bond between them was growing, just as Aldrich had warned. You can't promise that. You have a whole kingdom to protect. Then I'll protect them all, including you. His hand caught hers, stopping her work. I mean it, Elena. He stopped, seeming to catch himself. You're important to the kingdom, as a healer. But Elena could feel the lie in those words, could sense through their bond what he really meant. She was important to him, specifically, personally, in a way that transcended her role or position. It should have frightened her. Instead, it felt inevitable, like watching the sun rise, beautiful and terrifying and absolutely unstoppable. All done, she said, sealing the wound. Try not to get shot again. I'll do my best. Draven rose from the table, steadying himself against a brief wave of dizziness. When did you last rest? I'm fine. Elena, you've been working for 12 hours straight. Even I can smell the exhaustion on you. His expression softened. Go, sleep. That's an order from your king. Elena wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her with a sudden wave of fatigue. Fine, but if another wave of wounded comes in, Aldrich can handle it. Go. She left the infirmary reluctantly, but once she reached her chambers, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She barely managed to remove her blood-stained clothing before collapsing into bed. Sleep came quickly, but it wasn't peaceful. She dreamed of silver arrows and dying vampires, of Draven fighting endless waves of hunters while she stood frozen, unable to help. In her dream, the bond was a visible thread of light, growing brighter and brighter until it burned. She woke to darkness and someone sitting beside her bed. Don't scream, Draven said quietly. It's just me. Elena's heart hammered as her eyes adjusted.
He sat in the chair by her window, moonlight casting his features in sharp relief. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the attack, about how close they came to breaching our inner defenses." He was quiet for a moment, and I kept thinking about you, worrying. The bond makes it worse. Elena sat up, pulling a blanket around herself. "Aldrich warned me about that, the bond intensifying." "Did he warn you that it goes both ways, that I can sense you too?" Draven's eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "I felt your distress in your sleep, your nightmares. I probably shouldn't have come, but—" He trailed off. "But the bond pulled you here," Elena finished. "I dreamed about the attack, about losing you." "You won't lose me. I'm significantly harder to kill than I look." "That's not as reassuring as you think." Elena drew her knees up to her chest. "This is getting complicated, isn't it? Just like you predicted." "Spectacularly complicated." Draven ran a hand through his dark hair. "I should leave. Put distance between us. Let the bond weaken naturally over time." "Will you?" "No." The admission seemed pulled from him reluctantly. "I should, but I won't."
I'm 1,000 years old, Elena. I've trained myself to do what's necessary, even when it's difficult. But when it comes to you, he looked at her directly, I find my discipline failing. Elena's breath caught. "Draven, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I know all the logical reasons why this is a terrible idea. You're human, mortal. We exist on different timescales. I'm your king, your employer. The power imbalance alone makes this ethically questionable. And yet, none of that matters when I'm near you. The bond has made something undeniable between us, something I can't simply logic away." "What are you saying?" Draven stood, moving to her bedside. "I'm saying that I'm done pretending. Done acting like this is purely professional. I care about you, Elena, more than I've cared about anyone in centuries. The bond accelerated it, but the foundation was there from the moment you ran to me crying that I was hurt. You saw past the monster to the person underneath." Elena's heart felt too large for her chest. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of this, of us, of what happens when I inevitably age and you don't. Then we'll face that fear together. If you want to." He cupped her face gently. "This is your choice, Elena. Always your choice. I have power over many things, but not over your heart. Tell me what you want." Elena leaned into his touch, his skin cool against hers. She thought about Aldrich's warning, about the pain of loving someone immortal. She thought about all the logical reasons to refuse, to maintain distance. And then she thought about how right it felt when Draven was near, how the bond between them hummed with possibility, how for the first time since her mother's death, she felt truly seen and understood. "I want this," she whispered, "even though it's terrifying and complicated and probably doomed. I want this." Draven's expression transformed, relief and joy and something deeper flooding across his features. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers.
"Then, well, make it work. Somehow." "That's not much of a plan," Elena said, but she was smiling. "I'm 1,000 years old. I've survived wars, revolutions, and political upheavals. I think I can handle figuring out a relationship." He pulled back slightly. "Though I should warn you, dating a vampire king comes with certain complications, such as jealous nobles, political intrigue, the occasional assassination attempt." He said it lightly, but Elena heard the serious undertone. "Anyone close to me becomes a target. If we do this, you need to understand that." "I've been a target since the day you made me your healer," Elena pointed out. "At least now there's a reason for it." Draven laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "You're extraordinary. You know that. I'm practical. There's a difference." He kissed her then, softly, his lips cool against hers. It was nothing like the intensity of the feeding. This was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Elena leaned into it instead, her hands finding his shoulders, anchoring herself to him. When they finally parted, both were breathless, her from need, him from habit. "I should go," Draven said reluctantly. "Let you rest properly. We have difficult days ahead. The hunters will attack again, without question. And next time, they'll be better prepared." His expression hardened. "I need to find out who's supplying them with these weapons. That requires investigation, intelligence gathering, dangerous work. Then I'll help." Elena's tone broke no argument. "I'm not some fragile flower to be locked away for safety. I know. It's one of the things I—" He stopped, then smiled. "One of the things I appreciate about you." Elena noticed the change in phrasing, but didn't comment. It was too soon for declarations, too early in whatever this was between them. But the feeling was there, hovering, unspoken in the space between them. Love, or the beginning of it, terrifying and wonderful in equal measure.
The next week brought an uneasy calm. No further attacks came, but the tension in the castle remained high. Draven increased patrols, reinforced defenses, and sent scouts to investigate hunter movements. Elena continued her work in the infirmary while secretly helping Aldrich research the new silver compounds used in the attacks. Their relationship, hers and Draven's, remained private. They stole moments together in his study after her evening reports, conversations that stretched late into the night. He told her stories of his long life, the kingdoms that had risen and fallen during his reign. She told him about her childhood, her mother's teachings, her dreams of being more than a servant. The bond between them deepened naturally, no longer requiring feeding to strengthen. Elena could sense Draven's moods from across the castle, knew when he was troubled or tired or thinking of her. The connection was both wonderful and overwhelming. But their secret couldn't last forever. Lord Victor requested a private meeting with Elena on the 8th day after the hunter attack. She found him in one of the castle's many sitting rooms, his aristocratic face unreadable. "Thank you," he said, gesturing for her to sit. Elena remained standing. "What do you want, Lord Victor?" "Direct. I appreciate that." He poured himself wine from a crystal decanter. "I want to discuss the king's recent behavior. He's been distracted, his attention divided. Some might say, compromised." "The king is dealing with a security crisis," Elena said, carefully. "Indeed, but his distraction predates the attacks." Victor's eyes were sharp. "It began, curiously, around the same time you offered yourself as his blood source." Elena kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're implying." "Don't you? Come now, Elena. I'm not a fool. I can smell the bond between you and the king. Every vampire in this castle can." "The question is whether you developed feelings before or after feeding him. My relationship with the king is none of your concern. It becomes my concern when it affects his judgment." Victor set down his glass. "I've served Draven Nightborn for 400 years. I've seen him weather countless storms, make impossible decisions, sacrifice personal happiness for the good of the realm. He's been an exemplary king precisely because he maintained emotional distance from his subjects. And you think I've compromised that? I think you've made him vulnerable." Victor's tone wasn't cruel, merely factual. "Love makes us weak, healer. It clouds judgment, creates blind spots. The king needs clarity now more than ever, not romantic distraction." Elena felt anger flash through her. "You asked me to offer myself to him. You said his weakness was dangerous. I wanted him fed and functional, not emotionally entangled." Victor moved closer. There's a difference between a transactional feeding and a bonding. You were supposed to solve one problem. Instead, you've created another. That's not fair. Fair. Victor's control cracked slightly. This isn't about fairness. This is about survival. The hunters are getting stronger, their weapons more sophisticated. We need our king at his absolute best, not mooning over a human girl like some lovesick youth. How dare you? I dare because I care about this kingdom. Victor's voice rose. You'll be dead in 60 years, Elena. Maybe sooner, given how fragile humans are. But this kingdom will endure for millennia. Which matters more, your temporary happiness or the eternal safety of thousands? The words hit like physical blows. Elena forced herself to remain composed. You're asking me to leave. I'm asking you to consider what's best for everyone involved, including Draven. Victor's expression softened marginally. He won't ask you to go. His feelings won't allow it. So I'm asking instead, for his sake, for the kingdom's sake. And if I refuse? Then I'll have no choice but to bring the matter before the High Council. They can formally dissolve your position, forcing you out. Victor moved to the door. I don't want to do that, Elena. It would humiliate both you and the king. But I will if necessary. Think about what I've said. He left her alone in the sitting room, his words echoing in her mind. Elena sank into a chair, her hands trembling. She had known this was coming, on some level, had known that their relationship couldn't remain private, that there would be consequences. But hearing it stated so bluntly, being asked to choose between her own happiness and Draven's effectiveness as a ruler, she found Draven in the training yard, working through sword forms with inhuman grace. He spotted her immediately, his expression shifting to concern. Elena, what's wrong? He was beside her in moments, his hand on her arm. I can feel your distress through the bond. Victor knows. About us. Elena kept her voice low. He threatened to bring it before the High Council if I don't leave voluntarily. Draven's eyes flashed dangerously. He what? He says I'm making you vulnerable, compromising your judgment. He's worried about the kingdom. Victor can take his concerns and… Draven stopped, visibly reining in his anger. I'll handle this. He has no right to threaten you. But he's not wrong, is he? Elena met his eyes. You have been distracted. Everyone can sense the bond between us. If the nobles think you're compromised, then they're welcome to challenge my leadership in formal session. Draven's tone was steel. I'm the king, Elena, not Victor, not the council. Me. And I decide what's best for this kingdom. Even if what's best is distance from me? Draven pulled her closer, his expression fierce. You're not leaving. I won't allow it. That's exactly what Victor's afraid of, Elena said softly. That you'll choose me over the kingdom's welfare. The kingdom's welfare includes its king's well-being, which includes you. He cupped her face. I'm not some fragile ruler who crumbles at the first sign of emotion. I've ruled for a millennium, Elena. I think I can manage both a relationship and a kingdom. Elena wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. What if he's right? What if I am a distraction? Then distract me. Draven kissed her, hard and claiming. Let them talk. Let them worry. I've survived worse scandals than falling for my healer. Despite everything, Elena smiled. Is that what you're doing? Falling for me? Hopelessly. His expression softened, and I suspect the feeling is mutual. Completely mutual, Elena admitted, which is why Victor's words hurt so much, because part of me wonders if he's right. He's not. Draven's certainty was absolute. You make me stronger, not weaker. You remind me why I fight, what I'm protecting. A kingdom led by a cold, emotionless ruler is just another tyranny. My subjects deserve better. Elena leaned into his embrace. letting his conviction bolster her own doubts. But even as she stood there in his arms, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their troubles. And she was right. 2 days later, the High Council called an emergency session. Draven was required to attend, and Elena, as the subject of discussion, was summoned as well. The council chamber was imposing, a circular room lined with ancient stone and lit by floating orbs of cold light. 7 vampire nobles sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle, with Draven's throne elevated above them. Elena stood in the center of the room, feeling very small and very human. Lord Victor addressed the council first. "We are here to discuss a matter of grave concern, the king's inappropriate relationship with a human servant. This relationship has created a feeding bond of unusual strength, which we believe compromises His Majesty's ability to rule effectively." "That's absurd," Draven said coldly. "My personal relationships have no bearing on my governance."
"With respect, Your Majesty," said Lady Meredith, a council member who looked barely older than Elena, despite being 5 centuries old, "that's not entirely true. Your distraction since forming this bond is evident. You've been late to council meetings, inattentive during strategic planning sessions, and, according to reports, you've reduced your time with advisors to spend more hours with this girl." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that most of those hours were evening reports about infirmary business, but she also knew it would sound like an excuse. "Furthermore," Lord Victor continued, "the girl is mortal. Even in the unlikely event that this attachment doesn't compromise your immediate judgment, what happens in 50 years when she ages and dies? We've seen vampire rulers devastated by mortal lovers before. The grief incapacitates them for decades. Can this kingdom afford that risk?" "You presume I'm incapable of managing grief," Draven said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We presume you're immortal, not invulnerable," another council member spoke up, Lord Theron, ancient and grim. "Love is a weakness, Your Majesty, especially love that's certain to end in loss." Elena felt something break inside her, because they weren't wrong. Everything they said was logically true. She would age, would die, would leave Draven grieving. The bond between them guaranteed that pain was coming. "I disagree with the premise of this entire discussion." Draven stood, his presence filling the chamber. "You speak of love as weakness. I say it's strength. It's what separates us from the mindless monsters humans fear. My attachment to Elena doesn't diminish my capacity to rule. It enhances it. She reminds me daily why this kingdom matters, why protecting both vampires and humans is worth the effort." "Pretty words," Lord Victor said, "but words don't change reality. The girl is a liability. Then make me immortal."